I tried to go and help him cut some wood when he was 74. He had had a surgery 2 years before that. And about 4 hours into it with the chainsaw, I have to make him take a break. Not because I'm worried about him, because I literally need a break. This is 4 hours of using a saw, and I start thinking I am wore out. I know and I look over there and he's just pouring sweat, but he won't stop.
Doyle Cox was with the first American troops into Korea in the summer of 1950. He was a member of what's known as Task Force Smith. Those were the Americans who fought in the Battle of Osan, the first American engagement in the war in Korea. He was awarded 5 Bronze Stars in the war, 3 with the V attachment for valor in combat. But for most of his life, he refused to tell the stories of what happened during the war. So was that just due to being a member of his generation, stoic and humble? Maybe it was just better for him to push those unpleasant thoughts out of his mind. The combat losses for the 24th Division in the first 2.5 weeks of the Korean War were comparable to the losses for U.S. forces at Omaha Beach and Pearl Harbor. And Doyle Cox was honored for heroic acts in some of the most intense combat for U.S. forces during the war. At the Battle of Osan, the Americans were outnumbered 5 to 6 to 1. We'll never know all the reasons why he never told so many of those stories. Regardless, I want to thank Doyle's son, Troy Cox, for telling all of us what he knows about these stories, plus about his journey of learning all this, and about the complex man his father was. There's a well-known Cherokee proverb, "Don't judge a man until you've walked in his shoes." I think that's fitting for the story you're about to hear. My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee.
By the time he was 7 or 8, he was having to help in a sawmill, whatever he could, carry slabs, whatever, just to make 2 or 3 pennies a day. And that, I would say, "Dad, did you really make only 2?" He said, "I wasn't even supposed to be working at 7 or 8, but yeah, they'd give me 2 or 3 cents a day. But at the end of the week, 10, 12 cents bought a lot back then."
Say that part again. He was how old when he worked the sawmill?
7 or 8 years old.
Think about that. 7 years old in a sawmill.
He only went to 2nd grade, and you ask him, the boys have asked him, I've got 2 sons, and they've asked him, "Why did you have to quit school?" And he said, "To help the family eat."
Even in his generation, I think his toughness clearly stood out. And I think that's evidenced by his military record and the things that he did, Yes, they were tougher back then, but there was something different about your dad.
He hated the word quit. He hated the word no, if you didn't respect the word no. And he respected the military. He followed orders well. I've told you off camera, he was not a man that would argue. It was either shut up or fight. Because if he was willing to argue his point, he was not going to change his mind. Dad saw no gray. He wouldn't really recognize this world today because there was no gray area in his life. It was either right or wrong. And that's, now I'm not saying he didn't make mistakes, he did. But he would tell you, I'm not perfect and I made mistakes. He wouldn't try to cover it up and he wouldn't lie. He's very straightforward.
Yeah. You knew the toughness of the man, but there's a lot of this military stuff that you didn't know for a long time.
No, Dad had a temper. My 2 boys softened that temper up and really got him to open up far more than I ever did, and that was amazing to see. He loved those 2 boys amazing. It amazed me and my wife to see how he changed. The older the boys got, the relationship he had with them, that was just his life. But he had a temper growing up, and I asked him at age 12 about the war because I'd really never heard a lot about it. I'd heard him wake up screaming a couple times at night, and my mom would tell me, he's just having nightmares. So I wasn't really allowed to ask him a lot about that. But one time in particular, at a home we grew up in Middle Valley, I had forgot and asked him in front of a friend, trying to get him to maybe tell a war story, and he basically told me to shut up. And I asked him again, you didn't do that with him, and so he knocked me across the room. And that's and I don't you think he was a violent dad, because that same man would go to bed, or before he would go to bed, would come up and kneel down beside my bed and put his hand was huge. He'd put his hand on my back and he'd pray for me every night. He'd thank God for me every night. So that same man was in the same body. And it took you a little bit to growing up to understand, I've got this man that can be so mean. At 12-year-old, you think that's pretty mean, but yet so loving. I don't think there's a day ever went by that he didn't tell me he loved me. And that meant a lot to me.
I heard him say in that interview, it's online.
The interview with Doyle Cox mentioned here can be found on the Library of Congress website. That interview was produced by another TV station in Chattanooga, Local 3, as a collection of personal narratives from military veterans. The interviews are outstanding. I've watched many of them. Troy's son Brandon was the one who convinced his grandfather to do the interview. Troy says he couldn't believe his father agreed to it, and as far as he is aware, that interview was the only time Doyle Cox told many of these stories.
When he came back from the war, he didn't think about it a lot, didn't, that kind of stuff. And as he aged, he did, and that's pretty common. So, at what point did you start hearing stories? At what point did you start learning more about this?
We had I can't remember the story, but he had one of the men he saved from going up when that lead tank got hit was Freddie Johnson. And they become friends. Freddie also boxed with Dad. He was a heavyweight boxer, and Dad was a midweight in the Army, but Freddie was one of the soldiers that got hit with shrapnel metal, and Dad, went up the 70 or 100 feet, whatever it was, and drug him back, taking fire. His helmet actually got shot. Listening to Freddie, Dad never told me this. Freddie said, your dad had 2 bullets graze his helmet as he's pulling me back, but he wouldn't let go of me. Well, that man reconnected with Dad around 1977 or 78 and drove down here from Indianapolis, Indiana. And I can remember Mom asking Dad, why is he coming all this way? And he said, I really don't know, and just wanting to see me. But when Freddie got here, I can remember him telling Dad, I was not going to let any more time pass till I come and thank you for saving my life. And Doyle, you saved it more than once. And so I kind of overheard some stories there, but again, Dad didn't really, that was their conversation. I was around listening, but it wasn't to me. So I heard a little bit about that at 77, 78. Dad had one person on earth, and that was his brother Robert, that he was as close to as I've ever seen 2 brothers. And he had told him some stuff, I'm assuming, because I heard Uncle Robert and Dad and my mother talking one day, and Mom jokingly had said something derogatory about Dad, and I think in a joking way, but I'll never forget, my Uncle Robert turned his head around and said, you have no idea what this man's done in his life and the hell he's been through. So you don't think about any conversation like that until after we found this, and you go back and you realize some of the things he must have seen. And then those conversations come back to your memory of, maybe now I understand why Robert would say that, because I didn't understand why my uncle would say that about Dad. I'm like, well, what did he do? But I was too scared to ask, because he didn't want. And in that interview you're referring to, he says in there they told us not to talk about it. They were trained when they come back to not talk about this. And one thing he did was follow orders. I mean, he had that ingrained that if that's what they told him, then he wasn't going to talk about it. But as he got older, my 2 boys kind of got him to open up. They were more curious, I guess, than I was, or they saw the softer side of him that I saw. Dad died in 2011, and when he died, he has 5 acres that he gave to my 2 children, and a house up there, and I built him a little garage on it. In fact, I've still got some stuff stored in that garage. But when he died, we had to go up there, and and go through some things. And we come across a certificate of valor, and wrapped up in an old piece of plastic. It was folded up. You barely could see through it. It was old. And there was something silver in it, and I opened it up, and a dog tag fell out of it. And in that, I started reading about that certificate of valor, and was pretty impressed that somebody had, give him a nice accommodation. So me and my wife put it in a shadow box, and we put it in my office. Robert Cothran, which is a great friend of mine, good man, he got the Vietnam Veteran Memorial up in Saudi Daisy and had a lot to do with that. He come by, he was the mayor of Saudi Daisy at that time, and he come by to welcome us into this new office. And he saw that, and he asked me if that was Dad, and I said yes. And he wanted to know if I'd ever looked at his DD-214 that would tell what that was for. And I said no, I didn't know what a DD-214 was.
So Troy reached out to the local veteran service officer, and that's when he learned for the first time about the 5 Bronze Stars. He learned stories about his father that he had never heard before.
And he started to tell me what it takes to get a V attachment on a Bronze Star, or some of the characteristics that you must do. It brought tears to my eyes of me remembering back the man that had that temper, but that same man that would pray for you at nighttime, and that would not miss a ball game of mine, a practice. He was relentless, and his word, you just start remembering things about him. We tried to get his file. They told me it was sealed. Then they told me it was burnt in the National Archive fire of 1973. I got Marsha Blackburn, Senator Marsha Blackburn, to help me, and she jumped on board and really, I think, pushed this issue and got Dad's file unsealed and got me what part that was not burned. We have that file here. There's only 1 or 2, I don't know what you call the accommodation letter, to where he got 2 of the Bronze Stars. We don't know what the other ones are for. It's listed in there. He was wounded twice but refused medical treatment. That's amazing. I mean, I don't know of any man that would refuse medical treatment, except if you knew my father, you would anticipate him saying, if they're fighting, then I'm still going to fight. That was just Doyle Cox to a T.
The part you said about how he never missed a ball game, never missed a practice, mm-hmm. and you think about like fathers today who I guess probably back then too, who weren't as involved. He was a complicated man, obviously. He showed love, but showed toughness in very specific ways. But he was also there, like always there. What do you think about when you think about that? Just kind of and the model that set for you as you moved on as a father and in your life.
Well, we were so close, Josh. We were a poor family. Dad was a Teamster, but if you go back and look in the 70s, you'll realize that 30% of the time, if not 40, they were laid off. The trucking industry with the deregulation and all that, they really started hurting as far as continuous work. So he had to pick up jobs to pay our bills, and the best thing he learned to do was fish, and we would run trot lines in the Chickamauga Lake. And as early as I can remember, I was always helping him cut bait and run the trot lines and sell the fish, and we cut firewood in the winter. Whatever we had to do, he was the hardest working. And if anything comes out of this story about my father, he was the bravest man I have ever saw. I've never saw him back down from it. If it was 10 men or 1 man, he would not back down. He would not change. He would not. He was steadfast. There was no. I've never seen fear in his eyes. But the other thing is he was so devoted to take care of his family. He was the hardest working human being I've ever met. I tried to go and help him cut some wood when he was 74. He had had a surgery 2 years before that. And about 4 hours into it with the chainsaw, I have to make him take a break. Not because I'm worried about him, because I literally need a break. This is 4 hours of using a saw, and I start thinking I am wore out. I know and I look over there and he's just pouring sweat, but he won't stop. And my other, I call them brothers, but my three cousins, we all used to joke because they would take breaks. But Dad would not take a break. When he started a project, he would not stop. He didn't believe in stopping eating lunch. He just, we'll stop and we're done. That was just the way he was. He got going and he wouldn't quit. So, hardest working man that I've ever met and the bravest man I've ever met.
How do you think that impacted you in your life, as far as seeing an example of that? Someone, like you said, hardest working person you ever met, but at the same time clearly resourceful as well. Like you said, a lot of folks, I don't know if they would think, okay, I don't have any money, I need to go fishing. You know what I mean? He clearly had, had something in him, to figure these things out.
Yeah, I had a Jeep that he gave me when I was 16. But he told me real quick, I don't pay for the gas, I don't pay for the oil, that's all on you. So I asked if I could put my own trot line out and fish. And that's the way I got all my school friends didn't know that. But I would run that trot line by myself, and I would sell them to Benny Lunsford over on Hickson Pike, Double L Barbecue. And that's all the money that I got off my single trot line I was allowed to keep, and that's what paid my gas money. And any money I had, that's where I had to get it. Because I knew Mom and Dad, there's no way they could have extra money for me. So that's what I done, and I learned from him. I don't think I'm ever going to be the man Dad was. He was tougher and probably a harder worker than I am, but I try, and I've tried to instill in my two children, never give up. You've got responsibility. Never give that up, because responsibility will make a man have character and integrity that he never knew if you'll accept that responsibility. And I think that's what he tried to teach me, is never run from your responsibilities. Just accept it and realize it'll make you better.
What has it meant to you the last few years that you said, you got Senator Blackburn involved in getting his record? The county's planning something for Veterans Day weekend. State Rep Hazelwood has helped you out. You've had a lot of folks in some pretty interesting positions step up to try to figure some of this stuff out for you.
Patsy Hazelwood stepped up and helped get this story to Governor Bill Lee, and they done a proclamation, a resolution about Dad, and I was very thankful for that. I just want this to be about him. Dad was a prankster, a jokester. If you were, and I've got to be delicate the way I say this, but if you were anybody, a family person trying to make it and doing a good job, just a good person, man, you had him on your side. He would give you the shirt off his back. He could not stand a coward or a liar or a lazy person. He just had no tolerance for it. I don't know where he got that, but he had no tolerance for that at all. If you want to see that man's temper go off, be lazy in front of him. I knew when we were working, when I was little, man, I couldn't stop. He would tell me, my blood runs through you. You don't stop till I stop. He was hard. But again, I wouldn't take nothing from it. It's amazing looking back. I'm blessed at the childhood I had.
When you read those letters, like you said, about him saving lives in combat, it doesn't sound like that was a surprise necessarily that's how he would respond in that situation.
No, he. Anytime you were in a situation where there were people around, and if you needed someone to stand, and I think Shannon, my youngest son, is a lot like that. Dad would not let anybody be bullied around him. There was no way. Or anybody mistreated. So he was always the first voice to speak up. Dad was not a shy person at all. Like I say, he was straightforward. And if something on his, if it was on his mind, you're getting ready to hear it. He wouldn't think about what he was going to say. He just said it. It come out. That initial thought become verbiage, and it was here. There was no process. Let me see if I can clean this up. It was just straight out. That's what you got. It was raw, but it was Doyle. So when I look at things that he done, I'm really not surprised. I'm surprised he made it. Looking at all the casualties, that certificate of valor says there's 20,000 enemy troops and only 406 U.S. soldiers against 20,000 for a few weeks before they got any more there. Only 16 of those 406 lived. I think it goes back to show you what Dad was raised in and just that survival instinct mode he had. He was an incredible marksman. I've never seen anybody with a rifle as accurate as he was. In fact, the Army give him that one. You'll see when you do a shot of that memorial thing we done for him. One of those things is a Top Gun award. I mean, he actually trained some of the rifle artillerymen. But he was just an incredible marksman. So, yeah, I'm surprised that I never knew it. I would think that Dad would have told me at some point in life about this, but it took a grandchild to open up and get him to talk about it, because he wouldn't talk about it with me.
Yeah. You told me last time I was here that his toughness, his kind of take nothing off anybody kind of thing. That was well known in the community. People knew him in that way, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. My son's laughing, but yeah, Doyle and Robert Cox, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, around the Saudi, Hickson, Middle Valley area, they were well liked, but you didn't want to mess with them. They protected each other and their families. Dad he was not one to ever start a fight. When he would drink, and he did have a drinking problem at times, then he become violent, more so than others. But other than that, he never wanted to fight. He wanted people to. He was the one in the crowd that was always laughing, always joking, trying to get everybody to loosen up and have a good time. He loved planning more than any person I've ever seen. I could call him in his 70s, and even in his 40s and 50s, I can remember him telling us what we're going to do 2 and 3 weeks out, how we were going to stack this wood in 2 weeks, because he planned everything, and I think the Army probably taught him that.
Yeah. What do you hope people who watch this take away from it, understand about your dad? What do you hope people see in it?
Well, one, and I know this sounds almost like a cliche, but I would ask that when people pass a veteran, don't assume you know what they've been through, because you don't. They might look like they're floating as smooth as a duck on top of the water, but they've got issues. Dad had issues. There's no doubt about that. I wished something could have been done to maybe get him someone to talk to back when he come home. I don't think that was as available as it is today. That help, it wasn't there. And he was trained not to talk about it. I don't think that's right. So just that if someone would look at this story, maybe they know a veteran, maybe it's a family member, but maybe be more patient with those people, because like I said before, you don't know what they've been through, and you'll probably never know what they've been through. He had a saying, if you give a man your word, then don't break it. And if you start a project, don't stop till it's done. That was ingrained to him somehow. I don't know. Maybe it was his granddad. I don't know. But he lived by that. He displayed that to everybody. And I hope in some way I've put that to my two children. And they, both of them remind me so much of Dad.
Troy has two sons, Brandon and Shannon. He says both remind him of his father in many ways. He calls both of them pranksters and says both, just like their grandfather, are determined and they have a never back down attitude.
I think that's part of the beautiful part, right? Is that, folks do leave us, but generations who are still here remind us of them. And like you sharing stories, this can live on. I think that's part of the good part. The thing that I got when you said that about your dad and how he never talked to anybody about it, just made me think about all the people that from that generation, World War II probably as well, maybe even a lot of Vietnam guys for a long time, just suffered in silence. Just didn't get help, didn't talk to anybody. Probably struggled with stuff the whole time, but you never really knew it or knew exactly what was going on with them. I think that's an important thing. Of there's help out there for everybody if they want it and they're interested in having it. And boy, it can make a difference to families. I can only think about how different you guys would be if he's able to talk out some of that stuff. Is it hard to talk about him, or do you feel like this is helpful for you to get some of this out and
it's
say some of
actually
this stuff?
fun.
Yeah,
it's actually fun to bring back the memories of Dad. Me and my wife literally talk about him every day. I'm sure my boys talk about him just about every day. He was a huge part of our lives. There's no description in a sentence or paragraph that could describe Doyle. It's just not. You had to watch the way he treated friends and family and the way he would protect you, encourage you. But boy, he would call you on the rug in a heartbeat and let you know if you wasn't cutting the mustard. He had no problem with getting a little bit more out of you. But he's very stern. But yeah, talking about him is fun. It does get emotional when I realize some of the things, looking back, maybe the reason of his reaction was because of an action back years ago. And like I say, I hope people will look at all veterans and not assume that they know what that man or woman has went through. To go over there and fight, leave this safety of this beautiful country we have, and to go over there and fight. You hear all the time that it's a great honor. I think it's more of a sacrifice than the honor could ever be bestowed. I wouldn't want to go. I would go, but I wouldn't want to go. Why would a man want to leave his mom, his dad, his brothers, sisters, his home, to go to a country you've never set foot on? You don't know one person there. You can't even speak their language. And fight for them. I don't think we take time to realize what that takes and what sacrifice that is. It's almost too much to ask of a man. But yet, thousands and thousands of soldiers have done it in the past and will continue to do it in the future. So we owe them, like I say, way more honor and gratitude than we can ever pay them.
I want to thank Troy Cox for telling this story. Doyle Cox passed away back in 2011. But after Troy learned more about his father's military history, he wanted to do more to honor him. So he reached out to State Rep Patsy Hazelwood, and she helped with a resolution honoring Doyle Cox. Troy asked that I note his appreciation for Tennessee Governor Bill Lee for his role in that resolution. Troy also wants to thank Hamilton County Mayor Weston Wamp, who honored Doyle Cox with a proclamation. What you're about to hear is part of that ceremony conducted at the county fair in the fall of this year.
We wanted to recognize a veteran, in this case, whose service was never fully known when he was with us. And so I'd like to invite to the stage the family of Doyle Cox. And I'll say a word about a great citizen of our community who served in the Army during the Korean War. Like so many of your family members and like so many of you, you came back, they came back with humility, respect for our country, love for our country, but they weren't quick to tell their stories. And so it was really only after Doyle's passing that his family even came to realize the extent of his bravery and service to our country. They found after he passed away that he had won not one, but five. He was awarded 5 Bronze Stars, 3 with V for valor. An extraordinary example of service and humility. And so what we're here to memorialize in honor of a great citizen of this state with his family, his son Troy, is a proclamation from Hamilton County detailing the extraordinary service of Mr. Cox. And I'll skip to the end. Whereas we choose to recognize and honor these great accomplishments at the Hamilton County Fair on Veterans Day weekend as a salute to Mr. Doyle Cox, and realize the importance in keeping brave actions such as his at the forefront of our minds and hearts, never forgetting those who've come before us. Now, therefore, I, Weston Wamp, Mayor of Hamilton County, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim November 10th, the day before Veterans Day, 2024, as Doyle Cox Day, in honor of Mr. Doyle Cox's dedication and commitment to our country, and posthumously observe one of our true hometown heroes. Cox family, thank you. Thank you for sharing your father's service. And for all of y'all, for being here. I hope we have a great weekend. Keep in mind, as you see the red, white, and blue all over this beautiful farm, that there's a whole lot more that binds us together in this great country than should tear us apart. Mr. Cox's service is a great example of that.
If you want to see our story that came from this interview, there's a link in the show notes in the description of this episode of Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.